While I was surfing the internet, if people still even say that, I found this video essay on discussing films in black and white, namely The Batman. And the film developed a brand new beauty to me that I had only assumed was the case, and I'm glad that I assumed correctly. And it inspired me to start a new series on this channel. So, in this video for the Borealis Company, we're going to focus on one film in particular and see if Get Out is better in black and white.
Sorry, man.
Okay.
Get out!
I'm looking to focus in particular specific scenes and shots that would make the black and white version worth it. What that means is I'm going to focus on 3 scenes and 1 shot that I really enjoyed watching and why I think it can make a sound argument for the black and white version over the color version. Ultimately, what I found with this film and the next film that I'm doing this with is that the black and white versions nowadays have the luxury of being a creative stylistic choice, rather than what just comes with the territory. And what that means for Get Out is that I originally assumed the themes would feel more visually evident in black and white, but what I found instead was the lighting choices. There's a softness in the light sources that I never really noticed before, and I think it helps reinforce the false coziness and forced intimacy that we see so much, especially in the Armitage household. But what about in the first scene I want to talk about, where Andre Hayworth is abducted?
And he put it half a mile away from Edgewood Lane. Huh?
The lining of the streetlights, I think, helps create those invisible lines within an environment that helps lead the audience's eyes to better identify the subject. But what I really thought about this moment is something I didn't think about when I saw it for the first time, probably because, abduction. But I suddenly thought, this Crusader gimp's pretty ballsy to pick a very well-lit suburban neighborhood to do this. I mean, it's practically a street-wide spotlight with how many lights it feels like there are. But doesn't that highlight the theme even more than before in color? It's super noticeable, and the ideal citizen should say something, even though it's trickier in the middle of the night when everybody's asleep. But I think it adds to the blind eye that people choose to have with topics like this, and it just makes the opening's foreshadowing all the more powerful. An opening scene in many films is designed to be a promise. Basically, it's the director or the writer in general saying, I promise you this is what you're in for over the next X minutes. And after this, I think Get Out needs to be a part of that conversation significantly more. If you can draw a line between select objects, they are very often organized to lead you to a certain subject in the frame. It's just how our brains are programmed, and on that note, I want to discuss how it's used in an oddly creative way with the scene that became a meme at one point, track practice. This was one of the most tense and memorable moments of the entire film, and I think it's all about the lines. Yes, it helps tremendously that he's in the center of the frame, which feels like it's an inevitable threat, but then you look at the lines of the shadows. Significant horizontal lines contrast against a character who is vertical and growing in stature, and therefore danger over time. I think the black and white also helps make him feel like he's teleporting more and more, because you're not allowed to find the color of his clothing clashing against the blue of the light and the vegetation. Now it's just gray and not that kind of gray. Originally, I was going to add the hypnosis scene as my third scene, especially the Sunken Place, because, holy shit. But as I was writing this scene, I was surprised to realize that this was not the scene that stayed with me in black and white. Instead, it's actually because of the function of the light sources that I mentioned in the opening scene, but more specifically, how they're used in the dinner scene with Chris, the Armitages, and our first encounter with Jeremy.
With your frame and your genetic makeup, if you really pushed your body, and really trained, you'd be a fucking beast.
The thing that always stuck with me while watching this is the glow of the candlelight and how you can just tell the warmth that's there. It creates a hazy, maybe even dreamlike feel, which makes sense because the entire film is actually based on a dream that writer-director Jordan Peele had. This scene in particular. But it builds this uncomfortable, maybe even uncanny juxtaposition that this story thrives off of. Everything is set and designed to feel welcoming and loving, but the more you watch this film, the more you can sense this underlying feeling that something's off. and it comes to a massive head when Jeremy's in the picture, the first character in the family who poses any kind of direct threat to Chris when he tries to drunkenly put him in a chokehold. It's a scene that just reinforces the feeling of constant overhead tension, something more noticeable when it's just bright gradient forms of white. So great, I guess, again. Now finally, let's take a look at my favorite shot. I wasn't going to do this originally, but I was truly blown away by how much I enjoyed it more in black and white than I had to include it in the video. And it's this shot of Rose leaving the burning Armitage house armed and in pursuit.
Grandma.
The director of the photography of this film really has some great shots that emphasize the power of centering a subject. If you want another example of this, I would highly recommend Mad Max Fury Road in its entirety. But of course, that's also very intentional. When Chris is so targeted, which I use that word very intentionally, putting him in the center of the frame gives that implication. Chris is in the center not just because he's the protagonist, but he's an object of desire in the worst way possible. So putting Rose in the center of the frame like this as well makes us subconsciously identify that power because we've been conditioned to recognize that from this framing over the last hour and a half. But there's something so poetically evil about a white villain ascending from a blazing white fire that really stood out to me. Not to mention, she's the only Armitage we see outside of the house and grounds. So it tells us this is an antagonist that's not bound to the limits of hell, and someone who can pursue Chris at a range that no one else can, given that she's the one who recruits the victims that we know of. I would assume that's not her in the Crusader gimp suit, it's probably Jeremy given the fact that he's the only one we know who likes to choke people out, and after re-watching that scene for this video essay, I mean, there's no way in hell it's not Jeremy. But Rose is the only one we have this much emotional investment in, and can confirm does this. If it was any other member of the family, it wouldn't work as well because we haven't spent the most time with them. Now, for the decision. With all that in mind, is Get Out better in black and white? Originally, I always feel like if you make a horror movie black and white, it gives them this classical feel, like a Universal monster movie or Psycho, and this film was starting to fit that pattern until I thought about why Get Out was made. The reason why this story is so powerful is because it reminds us that this problem isn't something of the past. I mean, I hope abducting black people for their brains was and is never a thing, but the alienation of someone who doesn't look like you and using someone for their bodies, especially for whatever kind of additional sick purposes, is unfortunately very real. Granted, we live in a world where we have put so much work into fixing this that it's not as commonplace as it used to be, which I'm very grateful for, right? If you look at 200 years ago, the amount of progress we have made as a society and maybe even as a world is incredible, but that doesn't mean that we've removed it. So to make it in black and white gives me this subconscious feeling of this is a story of how things were and not how things still are, and our need to be more mindful and aware of each other's experiences will always be prevalent. So, with that, even though I did enjoy this experience, I think Get Out is better in color. But that's just my 2 cents. What do you guys think? Do you agree with me? What do you think is the next film I'll be watching in black and white? Is there a movie in particular you want me to cover in black and white? Hell, what subjects on storytelling would you like me to cover? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our growing community of storytellers and story lovers. I love watching the subscriber count grow and know that there are people who look forward and actually participate positively in these videos and in these subjects. So if you would like to be one of them, please join our growing community. I would love that.
I mean, I told you not to go in that house.